As we move on, we're going to now look at and go over the simple math behind a profit and a loss in both call options and put options. We are going to Section 4, we are going to look at both profit and loss in call options as well as put options. For this specific set of slides, we are going to be referring specifically to call options. Let's discuss what happens when the buyer of a call option has a loss and the seller of the call option has a profit. I'd like everybody to jot down these numbers because we are going to be using them as we move forward. Jack decides to buy a call option with a strike price of $50. He pays $5 for the option price. At expiration, what happens if the stock price is less than the strike price? Simply put, when you purchase a stock option, you are really betting in the direction you believe the stock will go. Most buyers of call options will take either a complete loss or they will take a loss at some point in time during the time frame before expiration. If Jack allowed this trade to be held until expiration, he would take a complete loss. On the other hand, Tiffany has brought in $5 worth of premium that she retains but was given on day one. This is why it's important to understand in your trading plan, if you are deciding to buy options, whether they be put or calls, you have to stay very disciplined. Because if you don't, what is in this specific example is going to happen more often than not. So how do we calculate what is taking place? Jack purchases this option. He pays $5 for it. What Jack is expecting to happen, and we don't like using the H word, hoping to happen, is that the stock price increases to $58. He will then recover his initial outlay of $5 and he will make a profit of $3. If it moves to $61, he'll make the profit between $50 minus his premium, and then anything above $55 will be a profit. Now, Tiffany has sold this position to Jack. In this specific example, we are not discussing that this is not covered and Tiffany could take an unlimited. Let's take a look at what happens when the buyer realizes a profit and the seller realizes a loss. At expiration, what would happen if the stock price increases beyond the strike price minus the option price? Jack will again exercise and or close his trade out prior to expiration with a gain. In this example, we can see that the stock price closed at $67 upon expiration. The strike price of $50 is what Jack decided he wanted to purchase. The outlay of the initial $5 is his break even. So to make things simple, the strike price that we select, as we have discussed, has to go at least as high as the initial outlay of the premium we paid. Once that has been met, anything above that point is going to be profit. Jack realizes a $12 profit based on the math in this example. Tiffany realizes a $12 loss. Tiffany is going to take a complete loss in the premium she brought in. Let's look at what happens when no realizes a profit or a loss. At expiration, what happens if the stock price decreases a little bit below the strike price or directly at the strike price? Assuming we use the $50 strike price in these examples at a $5 cost, the break even is tricky. So let's go over what is taking place when we are at expiration. I think we have discussed enough when it comes to the math behind how much money you would make if you were above the strike, below the strike, etc. The break-even aspect is when we have to start to talk about converting the trade into stock. Because after market closes at 4 p.m. on expiration day, the option contract is going to actually start to use those two confusing words we discussed in lesson 2, which is contract and rights. So Jack's initial outlay of $5 was his premium that he paid. He believed that the stock was going to go below $45. If the stock closes at $45 exactly, he has not made up his premium or anything past that. Tiffany, who has brought in $5, now has to do something that's a little bit tricky, and most trading platforms will do this for you automatically. She is going to have to purchase the stock at the $50 strike price and then go immediately and sell it at the $45 strike price in the market. And when I say $45 strike price, what I'm referring to is the stock in the open market trading at $45. And that does sound very confusing. But this is something that rarely happens, as both parties would either close the trade out prior to expiration. However, if they do allow it to close at expiration, there is a possibility that you could both break even, the buyer and the seller. I added this into the lecture simply because it is something that could happen. There are going to be things we discuss that happen rarely, but could happen, and I believe are important to have in the lectures. Let's discuss what could take place and how you could be in a situation where you take an unlimited and or limited profit and loss. The word unlimited is usually not part of most beginner strategies, and it's normally not part of a strategy involving seasoned traders, simply because you can take an unlimited loss. If the stock price increases above the price that the option buyer has selected, the $50 strike price, plus the $5 they paid for that option contract, they will begin to realize a profit. Now, if you think about it, the buyer of the option wants the stock to go from $50 to $55. Now they're even. And then from $55, they would like the stock to go to $155 or $555 or $1 million. There is no cap to how high a stock can go, which is where the option buyer can have that unlimited profit potential. And the seller of that option will have an unlimited amount of risk because of the fact that that stock can go as high as it wants to go. When we look at the strike price going at $50 with a $5 outlay, and the stock is going, let's say it's moving lower slowly, however it closes below the $50 strike price point, the max loss and the max gain that both the buyer and the seller can take is $5. The buyer paid $5 for that option and it expired worthless. The seller brought in $5 on day one immediately and retains that $5 throughout the time that the contract, whether it's monthly or whether it's weekly or quarterly, that belongs to Tiffany and she is not going to have to give that back. Let's take a look at the profit and loss diagram for call options. This is a confusing looking graph. However, once you add numbers to it, you will see that as you look at the profit and loss on the left-hand side, the option price both at, let's call it 0, as the strike price, as the call option or as the stock moves higher, the call option is going to move higher as well. That arrow can go as far as it would like to go. Now, the stock itself can only go to 0. So when we are simply referring to buying and selling call options, the buyer of the call option is going to have unlimited profit potential. The seller has unlimited loss potential simply because there is no limit to how high the stock can go. Now, I read that because I really think it's important, because I would like to emphasize these are not trades that are put on very often. What usually takes place is you have some sort of a cover for the seller of the option. I'm not discussing that right now because we are going to get into that in much more detail as we go into the different strategies that you can use with calls and puts. I want to thank you again for hanging with me. The next presentation, we will be discussing the put options, profit and loss. Thank you.